welcome. We're delighted to have you here tonight. It is a pleasure to welcome you to this unique and creative event with Jacqueline Suskin. I want to remind everyone that this program is made possible through Creating Conversations, which is our bookstore and events business based in Redondo Beach. We thank you for your support of us and of our author this evening. And we hope that in the future you will check out Creating Conversations for upcoming events, and to purchase Every Day is a Poem if you've not already done so. A couple housekeeping items. Everyone is muted as they come in. We'll give you the ability to unmute if we call on you to ask a question, but we believe that all questions will be through chat and we will moderate that. More about that in a little while. It is our experience that speaker view will be your best experience this evening. And the other reminder is that occasionally we will post some links or information in chat if you want to bring up chat, which is at the bottom of your screen. Okay, and with that, I would like to introduce Jacqueline Suskin. She has composed over 40,000 poems with her ongoing writing project called Poem Store, and I hope she'll tell us a little bit about that tonight. She is the author of 7 books, including the book we are discussing today, Every Day is a Poem. Jacqueline's work has been featured in the New York Times, The Atlantic, and Yes. When she's not writing poetry, you will find her in her garden growing much of the food she eats. She is a self-described earth worshiper and has a cat named Tio. She lives in Northern California, and you can find out more about her on her website, JacquelineSuskin.com. So with that, I introduce Jacqueline Suskin.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. And I'm going to just let everybody trickle in for a second, make sure you can hear me okay. And I'll change it to gallery view so I can see all your faces. I am going to walk through this book tonight in a different way than I have so far, which is I'm just kind of going to go chapter by chapter and see how much I can get to. And it'll give you a good overview of kind of the content of the book, but also like the ideas behind the exercises, and just to give a better feeling of how we would maybe interact if I were to be able to be in person with people and teaching. It won't be the same because I won't pause for us to actually write together or anything fun like that. But I will kind of just be able to tell you more about the book. So I'm just going to start at the beginning, and thank you all for joining me. And it's exciting to celebrate this book. I'm so just really jazzed to see how it enters the world and what it inspires and what kind of writing comes out of it. So the first chapter of the book is called Be in Awe of Everything. And I feel that awe is such a perfect place to start when you're trying to think about writing in general, not just poetry, but maybe even just accessing the world through a lens of awe. And I'll just read a little bit of this opening chapter. When I zoom out on my life, I'm in awe of everything. It isn't just the tiny details that wow me. It's the way that they somehow fit into the giant fold of the universe. This fitting together, this wonder of small and large, this is the heart of poetry. You can exercise it anywhere, anytime. I fell in love with the word awe about 8 years ago. I'm not sure how it came to me, but suddenly I found myself with 3 letters strung together that perfectly describe my most familiar state of being. The common dictionary definition of awe is a feeling of reverential respect mixed with fear or wonder. It's that reverential respect that I'm so often filled with when I take in our world. I like that fear is in there as well, not because I walk around afraid of the majesty that is life, but because it hints at the presence of death woven into the fabric of our impermanent existence. Our wonder is attached to the fleeting nature of our reality. So that focus on being able to sort of balance this like macro lens on everything and bring it down into the smallest detail is, I actually think, the like largest skill of being a poet, and just seeing the world through the eyes of a poet, which kind of is the heart of this book. I've said this a couple times in my interviews and stuff. I'm not trying to create a world full of renowned poets who are winning prizes and, you know, climbing the academic ladder of poetry. Mostly I'm just trying to inspire people to see awe and to see the world as a poet does. I don't even think you necessarily need to write to practice that as a mindset. So one of the ways that I like to talk about awe, especially in this moment in time, is there's a little paragraph that kind of covers how can we be in awe of things that are horrific. Awe is not married to the light. We can be in awe of darkness, that feeling of breath leaving the body as you gasp in horror while watching the news. That's awe. All things hard or soft are amazing. And this amazement comes from our ability to keep asking how and why. What's this all for? Where did it begin? Our stories continue to change as we ask more questions and look closer. We once thought the earth was flat. Our awe and wonder asked us to dig deeper, to find more, to know more, and to share it. As we roll in orbit around our burning sun, we know that nothing is certain, and it's our awe that keeps us interested in the great mystery. So the exercise that I have, the whole book is set up with these chapters that focus on, you know, me discussing a concept like awe, and then I give you an exercise, and then I give you a writing practice. So the exercise is to kind of like warm up your mind, and then the writing practice is to get you to do some work, as much or as little work as you want to do. But the exercise for finding awe is something that I really love to assign myself kind of in any moment. If I'm walking around, I feel like I'm doing this all the time, which is just point in any direction and choose something, whatever it is. The example I give here is to close your eyes and do this. When you open your eyes, what's the first object you see? Is it a street sign? Is it a tree? Is it a photo of someone you love? Is it a sandwich? Whatever it might be, I ask you to be in awe of it. How do we wake up the awe inside of us? You start asking yourself who, what, why, where, when, and how. Who made the street sign? Who first touched it? Who cut its shape? Who designed it? Who decided what it means? What kind of tree is it? What do you think about the color of its leaves? What feeling does it inspire inside of you when you see it? Why do you have this photo of someone you love in a frame? Why are they so important to you? Where did you buy the bread for this sandwich? Where did the wheat grow that the farmer used to make the flour? When did you last think about farmers and the fact that our food grows from the ground? How do you feel when you focus on the specifics that make up the world around you? A poem exists in this list of wonder. All of these questions and particulars add up, and the sum is poetry. So I love that the opening of this book is basically like, this is really actually simple to enter into this state. It's not this complex thing. I think we get a lot of connotation attached to poetry as it being this like really esoteric, difficult thing to access. But actually, you know, if you can find a practice, which I try to offer up in all these different ways throughout the book, I think it can come much more naturally and quickly, and you can find yourself in this state all the time, even when things are really hard. So I'll just move into the next chapter because I keep going on, and awe is really one of my most favorite subjects, and that's why I started with it. But it leads you to meaning, and the second chapter is called Make Meaning. So I love to just say meaning is a choice, and meaning is one of the most incredible things about being a human is that we get to choose what means what to us. We get to learn and assign knowledge and then dig deeper, and there's our, you know, our feeling and our sentiment that's attached. And in the book it says what's valuable to you isn't random. It's a crafted lens that you see through, that you add to and take away from willingly throughout your lifetime. So as you build up this practice of being in awe, you then start noticing the things that hold meaning for you because you're tuning into them more frequently. You're seeing, oh, I tend to lean towards the natural world, or oh, I tend to be more inspired by the people around me, or I'm inspired by architecture or the, creative building of humanity, progress as we see it, whatever it is. And you can kind of learn more about yourself. And then, I mean, I really think that this is kind of attached directly to that concept of finding something in the room, like closing your eyes and pointing at something. And I give the example of a pencil on my desk. Why is the pencil not just awe-inspiring, but what does it mean to me? And for me, of course, as a writer, the pencil means something really specific, but also I can attach it to like very personal moments in my life. So that the exercise for making meaning is pick up a commonplace object and give it meaning. It's fun to kind of break these things down because my hope is that the book will just offer up, if you're in a moment where you can't think of something to write, there are 10 chapters full of all these examples of different things you can do to kind of get yourself going and pick a direction. And, if you want to be more surface level or light in your beginning point, choose something really commonplace. Go to your kitchen, pick up a spoon, hold it in your hand and look at it. What's the first thing that it makes you think of? What is the first word that comes to mind? Does it offer you a memory? Does it connect you to something ancient and human? If you look at it and think, this is just a spoon that I use to eat soup, that's fine. But I bet you can notice more. Where did this particular spoon come from? Where did you buy it? Why did you choose it? Do you like eating with it? Is it too small or too big? How long do you think humans have been using spoons? Is a spoon sacred in any other culture? How can a spoon be sacred? Apply this exercise to any object in your home, and suddenly you'll see that everything holds so much meaning. Start writing these personal definitions down and see the value that's already overflowing in the commonplace. This is the infinite collection of meaning that surrounds you. Sometimes I need a reminder to get myself to start writing. And it's not necessarily like, oh, I want to write something I don't know what it's about. It's, oh, I have so much feeling. I don't know how to separate it. And I don't know how to find my starting place. And so signaling in on something that's tactile is really helpful because it kind of grounds you down. It gets you to like have a starting place. And then through that, you'll discover all of these feelings and ideas connected to meaning that maybe you didn't know you even had. I talk a lot in the book about discovering your personal mythology, and that's the writing practice of this section, is creating your personal mythology. If we want to saturate our lives with meaning, we can create our very own mythologies to carry with us wherever we go. The way we do this is by assigning importance and definitions to objects and symbols. This is a very old human practice. Think of 5 things that are undeniably significant to you. Let's say you choose family, home, love, fun, and health. Now assign an object or a symbol to represent each of these things. Family can be connected to the black bear because when you're all together, you're like a family of bears, cozy in their winter den. Home can be connected to the sycamore tree because there is a giant one in the front yard. Love can be symbolized by a red heart. Fun can be the image of a mountain because you love climbing and that's your place for fun. And finally, health can be symbolized by the sun because when you're warm and bright, you feel most vital. The bear, the sycamore, the red heart, the mountain, and the beaming sun. These are your symbols that you can carry everywhere with you and expand upon in writing. So I go into that a little further and kind of break down each of those symbols. And I just made that up for this as a practice. That's not true for me. But in order to test my idea, I did write a poem and try to assign meaning to those things. And this is an imaginary meaning, but I really do like this poem. And so it ended up in the book. It's called At Home. Standing at the base of the sycamore, the whole story of familial love circles us in dappled shade. We've come down from the mountain, carrying joy deep in our red hearts, sharing it as the sun flickers over our faces. Eyes lifted toward the leaves, a sense of satisfaction is steady as the seasons. sturdy as the bear who walks the trail somewhere near the ridgeline named after our very own kin. So that's just an example of just weaving those things together and making something that's a little more lasting, which in my mind, a mythology is something you kind of carry with you your whole life, but you're always adding to it. So I have symbols that have meant the same thing to me for years and years and years. And whenever I see them, I'm instantly dropped into that feeling or that mindset. And then I can access that and put that into my work. But also I can add to it and play with it and let it be this expansive thing. It's funny. I just want to read the whole book, but I don't have time to do that. So I'll choose wisely. I tried to put all these little tabs in here so I could pace myself. So then at the end of every chapter, there's a poetic mindset tip. So this is nodding back to what I was saying about this being an actual mindset practice. It's not just about writing. You can be a poet of the mind and not be a poet of the page. I really believe that. You can write sometimes, you can write secretly. You can never share your work at all and still fully embody what it is to be a poet in the world. And I'm much more interested in that than I am in everybody having to write the perfect poem. And so this little section to me is, I kind of think it's very important in this moment. And it's called Keep Your Meaning Up to Date. Meaning helps us pay closer attention and take care of the world around us. Meaning is what makes everything matter. I'm in awe of the new meaning that humans create daily, as well as the ancient meaning that we cannot seem to shake. Meaning is personal, it's individual, and it becomes collective. It's our job to refine our own beliefs so that our actions carry the force of all of our nuance, the power of our educated preferences, and the tone of our unique perspectives. Through the poetry of making meaning, we're illuminating personal and shared mythologies that inspire us all to be better humans, showing one another how to benefit from the complexity of consciousness. It's important that we put in the effort to refresh the things that we deem significant, to update our values as we change and grow, because this is the source of our selfhood, and we're not fixed beings. The more we craft and collect meaning, the more we reshape and rebuild our points of reference, the wider the reach we develop, the more we understand. And with greater understanding comes greater possibility for opportunity, success, togetherness, and resolution. That seems like we need a lot of that right now. So at this point in the book, you're chock full of awe and you're ready to assign meaning to things around you, and you have these practices to do that with. And then I kind of take another turn, which is chapter 3 is called Explore Your Purpose. One of my most favorite lessons in school was something very, very simple, because I have a degree in poetry, and one of my professors said, who are you writing for? And that just shifted my entire concept of the way that I write, because he was basically like, you can write for just yourself. And if you write for just yourself, if that's your purpose in your writing, then you don't really need to edit or consider making your work that accessible. If you want to write strange, esoteric, academic poetry, you'll have a very limited group of people who read it, and that's your choice. You get to think of who your audience is. And I was like, I want to write for everyone. And that makes it a lot more challenging. I have to create work that's accessible to everyone. And so that lesson actually highlights the sense of purpose that I go into in this chapter, which is actually not just about writing, but it begins with this story of me sitting on a rooftop in Oakland, California, where I was at a permaculture meeting learning about urban gardening. And this man who was teaching, he just said, so the first thing you need to know going into this work is, what do you serve? And I was like, what is that question? I had never had anyone, I must have been, 20 something years old. I'd never had anyone ask me that question before. What do you serve? And it did make me think of, who are you writing for? But it's an even higher question. And instantly I sat back, I looked at the sky, the sun was setting. It was this beautiful moment. And I thought, I serve the earth. Everything I do is in service to the earth. And so Everything I do as a poet, all of the energy I put into helping people through verse, it's all fueled by my hope to preserve the planet. I figure if I help people find clarity, if I help them become more aware of beauty, more appreciative of the infinite bounty that surrounds them on a daily basis, then they'll in turn become better and treat the earth better. I love planet Earth. It's such a perfect gift, and I aim to do everything in my power to help protect it. And this is my purpose. And so that purpose fuels every single thing I do. And just as I suggest connecting and reconnecting with your meaning, the same goes for your purpose. It's okay not to know your purpose. A lot of people don't, although I believe it's there inside waiting to be identified. Your purpose can change over the years. Your purpose can look clearly like something, and then you realize there's a hidden door to another aspect of intention that offers up new motivation. And that's the thing, is even though I'm so clear that I serve the earth, that expands throughout my lifetime as well. It doesn't just mean this one set thing. So in this chapter, the next exercise is exploring your purpose and discovering the purpose of your favorite writers. For me, it's so inspiring to look to people who inspire me already through their work and then figure out why they did what they did. Why did they write the things they were writing? Was it ego-based? Were they, mad on the mountaintop? Were they obsessed with science and wanted to bring a scientific lens into the poetic world? However, there's on and on, but the purpose behind people's desire to create art is always really interesting. So I go into just kind of leaning into that a little bit and understanding the people who inspire you already. And then I want, in this section of the writing practice, is I ask you to create a poem of purpose. And I think that will look really different for everyone, of course, but basically that came from this experience that I had where I just woke up in the middle of the night and wrote this really long poem about my purpose. And it's more of a list, really, and I'm not going to read it now because it's a little too long, but it is one of the most important things I've ever written for myself. And so as I guide you through that part, I think if you can kind of let yourself sit with that once a week even and just reconnect with your purpose, the exercise at the end, the mindset exercise, is just how to hold on to your purpose all day long. How do you continue to refresh that in yourself, especially in a moment right now where I can't speak for everyone, but I can speak for every single person I know. And all of us we're just constantly trying to reaffirm, what are we doing here? How are we helping each other? What is it that we're giving to this insane story of being alive? And to me, that's purpose related. And it takes a lot of work to, connect with your purpose constantly. You can't just expect yourself to wake up and be like, I'm full of purpose, especially right now. I don't do that. Even in the midst of celebrating a book that I'm really excited about, I still have to do the work of reaffirming my passion and my purpose every day. So I'm excited about that section for people. It ends with me saying, the moment we let go of our purpose, our own worth can go away with it. So holding on to purpose is in turn a radical act of self-preservation. As the weight of the world never lightens, loving yourself and upholding a persistent mantra of purpose can be a poetic gesture of wellness and joy. I think the word purpose is sometimes connected to a lot of capitalist intention, and I like to reassign that. The next chapter, I'll just briefly describe. It's called Share Your Answers. It's really important to share your work. You don't have to share your work, but it really opens up everything if you do. It'll open up your ability to write. It'll open up your connection with your audience because you'll have some reflection. I've worked with an editor for 15 years and he's read all of my work and we've been friends through it all. And it's very important for me to have his lens. But if you share all of your questions through your writing and your answers, people will then be learning with you. I just think I have a theory about this deep-rooted human desire to share, which we're sharing everything now. So that's it. I'm very fascinated with how that's working through technology, but When something significant occurs, let's say when I see an eagle flying above me, the moment is that much more special if I can share it with someone else. I'm a huge fan of solitude for thinking and self restoration, but when I delight over the wonders of life, I'm compelled to share them, to give them to someone else in the hope that they'll be just as or more inspired than I am. I give the moment to them through poetry, and therefore I honor the moment by sharing it. This is poetry. It's an exchange of moments, an offering of answers, a place where others can join in the lesson of wonder. And so that's, again, circling back to all of these other writers who have put themselves through the ringer to live a life dedicated to their practice so that I can open their book and have their inspiration. I can be illuminated by what they knew. So I, I can't, I don't like to stress sharing your work. I just like to show how important it is on the page. And you can decide for yourself how you want to go about that. But I give a lot of examples of like the ways you can share your work. And reading aloud to others is huge. I highly recommend that. I also just think you should read every poem out loud. Poetry is an oral tradition, and reading to one another can be transformative. When I write poems for people with the Poem Store project, I'm writing spontaneously. They tell me a subject. I have a typewriter, and I create a poem on the spot for them. And I read it to them afterwards. I always say, do you want to hear it? And that's just to get their attention because, yes, they want to hear it. And they listen, and then I get to know what it is that I wrote. And I also get to give them my voice and the practice of the oral tradition of poetry and the cadence of a poet's voice. If you have favorite poets, try so hard to find recordings of them because hearing them read their work will just take that to the next level. And so just finding your way to share your work. It literally could just mean you read your work to your neighbor. It doesn't mean you have to push too far. But and then that this is the chapter where I also discuss editing, because if you're going to share your work, if you are, answering your question of who am I writing for with, I'm writing for this person who I'm sharing my work with, or I'm writing for all of these people who I'd like to share my work with. Well, then I'm strongly going to insist that you edit your work, because I think a lot of times poetry just comes out really freely, and I have over 40,000 poems that I wrote spontaneously, but I also have all these books that I worked on for years and years, editing very carefully, and I think both practices are equally valuable. So I give some tips on editing in the book that I'm really excited about, because I feel like there are some simple concepts that you can practice that help make a fine-tuned poem. And a lot of those things are relating back to, again, a very simple thing I learned in school, which is show, don't tell. Don't use abstractions. So the show, don't tell is giving a lot of detailed image as opposed to just saying something point blank. If you write anything that you think you've heard before, try your hardest to add your unique lens to that. Assign an image to it that is a little uncanny, something that comes to your mind and only would come to your mind, because then that helps us have some fresh understanding of maybe like very abstract feeling like love or hate or fear or something that means something very different to every person. So I give these side-by-side poem examples of like a poem that is written where I'm just showing something, and then I rewrite the poem to show you what it looks like when I'm actually, giving all of the details and showing all the images. So there's a few of those that I think back to myself, like learning how to write and be a better poet. And those are the things that really got me to see kind of where some of my weak points were, or they're like easy, they're just easy tools to pull out of your bag while you're in process, or while you're editing. So the other one is an example of, using an abstraction and then fleshing that out and making it a much more expressive poem. There's also these journaling areas in the book, which I'm excited about. So like every time there's an exercise, there's space to write, which is really exciting to me. And I ask you like just some prompts and questions to help you kind of work words that maybe are coming up as cliche and repetitive for you, and then you can delve into those words. And that's one of my most favorite things to do. If I find myself using a word over and over again, I'm like, oh, I must love this word. And then I'll just go into the thesaurus for an hour and find every little link that I can. And I call that word work. And I go and I'll write down every word that seems like it's connected in order to kind of expand my vocabulary. But also, it's just really fun to see. If you're interested in writing, you're probably excited by language in general. So the thesaurus is your friend. And yeah, the end of this chapter is another thing that I think circles around to this moment in history really well, which is let accessibility be the inspiration in all communication. So one of the things that I think I'm very clear on my ability to communicate deeply with strangers is part of being a poet for me. It's not like that for every poet, but that is a huge part of my poetry. And I do think that engaging in a poetic mindset and engaging in poetry helps you be a better communicator. And that we really need that right now. So the reason for all of this exactness with your language is plain and simple. It's accessibility. We all want to be understood. And even if we aren't trying to write poems for everyone, we can work through our thoughts and make them easier for someone else to understand before we communicate them. This can be inspiring for all types of connection. When we ask a person we love for something difficult, a needed change in behavior, a request for honesty or appreciation, having our language come across as comprehensible and clear is really important. And this is the art of poetic editing. Are you sharing to the best of your ability? Can you consider applying some tools first so that when you speak or write, you're being as intelligible and as approachable as possible? This practice can reconstruct our ability to relate to one another, to connect on a deeper and more efficient level. A friend once called me a radical communicator, and I loved this. And I attribute my communication skills to my poetic mindset. My ability to speak clearly and fully comes from my consistent engagement with language and the fact that I believe each word carries great importance. Words matter. They're important. When you say something to the masses, like, you better know what you're saying. The next chapter, chapter 5, I'm just powering through. I hope you guys are enjoying the ride. Chapter 5 about using your senses. Your senses are an incredible source for all subject matter. Like, if you're trying to find something to write about, just tune into your senses. This chapter is one of my favorites just because it might seem really straightforward, but we overlook our senses all the time because they're just acting without us doing anything. You know, we don't have to think about them. And I love the little quote at the beginning of this chapter. But poetry is a portal through which we glimpse the shimmering inner core of sentience itself. That's Paul Brock. So this chapter really goes through each of the senses. I'm not going to do that right now, but that's a really fun one because it kind of shows you how to engage with each one of your senses and then pour that into your work. The next chapter is, I'd say it's the heaviest chapter in the book. It's called Use Your Pain. And the quote at the beginning of this is a Lawrence Ferlinghetti quote, and the state of the world calls out for poetry to save it. Poems don't just create a shared understanding of awe or lead us into sensual wonderment. They also help us uncover our pain and heal as we face the depths of our individual and collective ache. Poetry is therapy, whether you're reading it, writing it, or simply evoking it in thought patterns and perspectives. Through poetry, we touch the places that are too painful to linger in. We sift through our feelings of trauma, and we expose ourselves to the fact that we are not alone in this hurt. This chapter is longer, and it asks a lot of questions about pain, and it leads into the next chapter, which is about mapping your past and using your past and your memory and the hard parts of your life as a place of healing and transformation and exploration. I think that, and this is the centerpiece of the book, because I think, poetry is able to hold all of that. So that's a place for your pain. And the exercise in this section is exercise for making pain useful. And I'm really interested in how we utilize all of our lessons and all of the pain and trauma that we've gone through as human beings. And that's, again, leaning back to sharing it with each other and expressing it and letting it out. In our writing, we can uncover the how and why of our pain, looking deeper into the process of its becoming, and then we can begin to dismantle it. So again, if you're secretly writing or if you're publicly writing, you're doing this really difficult work that every person needs to do in order to feel better about being alive. There's a poem in here called "It is Hard to Be Alive," because it's very hard to be alive. It hurts a lot. And I look to poetry as every poem holds the power to do this healing work, to give a reflection, to present a relationship with newness and possibility. How can you show your reader your personal methods of self-care in a poetic way? And then I say maybe by writing a list of poems or even song lyrics that have been healing for you in the past. I have poems dog-eared and underlined in every book on my shelf, and I'll pull them out in a moment of need. They're reminders that, yes, it is indeed hard to be alive for everyone, even the people you look up to the most. So I go to tell you how to write a healing poem. There's a lot of questions in the book that I just leave space for you to answer, but then I also answer them with my own experience. So moving from the pain section into the use your memories section, I talk about mapping your past and kind of showing up for this therapeutic practice of looking back into your own history. And for me, even though I have plenty of intense trauma and horribly painful things in my past, I also look at my past and I cannot believe all of the things that I've done. And that is, no matter how painful, it's also just so affirming that I'm living my life, and I lived in this house. I went to this state. I have owned a pickup truck. Very simple things then amaze me when I look back, because there's a really long list. And so I show how to create this timeline, which is like a timeline of my life and what other things that I've done. And I ask a lot of questions like that might seem sort of base level at first, and then you get going and you'll find a lot of poems in there, like, what feelings come up when you read the word past? What incident from your past was truly transformative? What have you done in your life that you're proud of? What have you learned? What good deeds have left you with a feeling of fulfillment? What have you made, built, designed, brought into being? What jobs have you worked? Have you had children? Have you won any prizes or races? Have you written any books? Which books have you read? Have you painted any paintings? Painted a house? Has someone held you close while you cried? Have you written a song? Have you purchased a car? Have you ridden a bike, swum in the ocean, completed a certification? Have you eaten a delicious apple? They're just, all over the place. Like the whole spectrum of all the things that you've done add up. And again, as transformative as it can be to look at all of that, it's also just so inspiring and affirming. And when I do my writing and I write in a journal, I make sure I write by hand. That kind of, I show up for that practice. And even if I don't get a poem out of it, I get something like this out of it. I get some kind of like reflection and affirmation. And I just think, especially in this moment where a lot of our affirmation and reflection is coming through a screen, that my moments with my own writing are more affirmative than they've ever been, because I'm showing up for myself in this way that's visible and off screen, which feels really important right now. So after the pain and the past comes the joy. And this chapter is called Use Your Joy. And I love this Ursula K. Le Guin quote: "The poet's measures serve anarchic joy." I love her. She's one of my most favorites. So poetry is a form of praise, and I think of joy as this like radical and imperative act right now. Like, if you are finding a way to be joyous, please let other people know how, because it's not easy, and it's crucial for us to tap into joy so that we can continue living in this world. It's important to remember that in addition to the actions we can take by attending meetings to organize, signing petitions, voting, and voicing our outrage, our joy is a form of activism. Um, and so this section, I kind of break down how to write all these joyous celebratory poems, and how to like make a ritual of joy, and how to bring joy into your writing practice. Writing a celebratory poem for someone you know, or for something that happened with you. And I leave a lot of space for that. And then after this chapter, I'm trying to get it all in here. Only have a few minutes left before I will answer all of your questions. This chapter 9 is called Listening to the Poetic Universe. This is my favorite chapter because it offers up all of these ways that I make myself available to listen. And as a poet, listening to the universe is everything. I mean, that's where I find my awe, that's where I find my meaning. It's not just my own ego that's telling me all these things. It's whatever else is out there. You can call it whatever you want. The universe, the great mystery, the cosmos, God, the divine. It has many names, but there are also many, many things that can get in the way of you hearing it. And so this chapter is like example after example after example of how to tap into that and how I do that in my life. And it requires a lot. It requires a lot of practice. It requires a lot of faith. And so I'll just read the little headers and then we can go into the ending of all this. So the exercise for listening to the universe, how to take care so you can hear it. So there's a section about having a room of your own, like creating a space of your own where you can write, finding some corner in your house where you can turn away from everything else, even if it's just for 20 minutes. There's a section about walking. A poet loves to walk. You got to walk and move your body. I said I could also call this section A Poet Needs to Move, and write about all of the ways in which I have to attend to my body in order to remain open and clear-headed. Writing requires a lot of sitting, and if my body hurts, I can't hear the universe well. So there's a little message at the bottom that just says, we have to get our blood flowing for the poetry to flow. Make time for visions and dreams. So much of my inspiration comes from my dreams and from a blank space of vision or meditation. So I just kind of walk through what that looks like and how to get into that space. And that's a long one because that's a huge source of inspiration for me. There's a section about little notebooks. You got to have a little notebook everywhere. I have like a little notebook by my bed, a little notebook on my desk, a little notebook in my car, a little notebook in my pocket. I have a walking notebook. I have like all these little notebooks. And then I have a practice and a method of going back through all those things and sourcing what I want out of them and then using that later, so that it's not just you're piling up a bunch of notebooks and not using any of it, but you have this method that you create utilizing all of your ideas. Treat yourself. An important part of creativity is being kind to yourself, conserving your energy, creating a daily ideal. That's a good one. Just what is your ideal of the day? What would you just make it up and then write that down and put it on the wall and see what you can get to every day. I have a whole ending of this is using the tools, because there's a lot of tools that are already there that are accessible to all of us. And if you have them all written down, or you know what they are and you re-engage with them often, then you'll be able to access what is trying to speak to you. So the book closes with permission, giving yourself permission to be whatever poet you want to be, even if it's a poet who, like I said, doesn't write. And then there's a whole huge section at the end of the book that is just a resource section of all of the books. It's just a recommendation list of all the books that I love. So I'm really excited about that because people ask me all the time, like, what book should I read? And now I don't have to tell everybody. I can just buy the book. It's right there. So I think we can open it up for questions now, and I'll be here to answer whatever it is that you'd like to ask.
Okay, I have a couple of questions for you. One is from Sue Ann. Sue Ann says, I would love to hear you read and talk through one of the examples you gave in the book of the side-by-side where you went from, the sort of flow of consciousness poem to the edited, better to share with the audience poem.
I would be happy to do that. Okay. This one is showing the difference between using abstractions and not. The abstraction that I'm using is love. And I asked this question at the top of each poem. I said, why just tell us this? And then the poem is, I feel love in my heart when you come over. My tears stop, sadness leaves me, and I am no longer lonely, just happy and held close. And then the answer is, when you could show us this. This electric feeling is the universe saying, yes, bright spark in the center of my chest, fever rising from a dream. You arrive in the doorway and I am suddenly awake, thriving on your dark eyes, drinking your gesture of open arms. So you can kind of see the difference. I tried not to get too, I'm not going to make some really expressive, huge thing out of this. I'm just going to show you, this is how you, bump it up a little bit. This is how you add a little to that. And then here, I'll share the other one too, because I think it's helpful. Why just tell us this? The wonder of this day is the dove in the morning. The sun rises and it flies with white wings. It is beautiful and small, moving higher as I start another day. When you could show us this. The wonder of this day is the fringed white wing of the dove as it flies east toward the rising sun. First light caught in its laced flight, a lady's glove taken by wind. Its coo, a delicate voice that reminds me I am indeed beginning again. Okay, next.
That's lovely. Thank you. All right. Kristen says that she would love for you to expand on the notebook sourcing that you mentioned. Kristen says that her ideas tend to sort of pile up and she gets overwhelmed with how to create art from all of her collected lines and snippets.
That's an excellent question. I think that is a practice that took me a long time to figure out. There's a part in the book where I give this example of all of these symbols that I use in my journals now, so that when I go back through, I know, okay, I'm just looking for this symbol that's attached to this project. As I'm writing, I'll be like, okay, I'll write some idea, and then I'll think, oh, this is a poem that I need to edit. This is an idea for a poem. That's different. This, I'm writing a poem already. Or this is an idea for a poem that's in prose right now, or that's a ramble, and I need to come back. And I have these little symbols. So I have this page in the book that kind of shows the little symbols that I use. And this is an idea that's ready to come to fruition. So that when I'm sitting at my desk and I want to work on something specific, I'm going to look for those symbols, and I'm going to go and I'm going to find them and I will use them. It's been really helpful for me.
So a little bit of a follow-up for that. So sort of chicken and the egg, is that something that you developed as you became more experienced and you learned to recognize those, or are those
absolutely yes,
sort of?
Yeah, I did not know that to begin with. Yeah, no, I would just fill up my notebooks with rambles for a long time, and then when I started to realize, well, I'd like to make some books, then I was like, okay, well, I'm going to have to go back through all of these journals and find a theme or something that I can pull from. And actually choosing a subject for a book is a really great way to hone in on parts of your writing and ideas that you want to use from the past.
Excellent. Cece wants to know a little bit about your schedule. If you have a schedule for your writing day, how your process works for that.
Yeah, that also kind of depends on whether or not I'm working on a project. Like if I'm working on a book, I will have a very strict schedule. Like I wake up whenever, usually like extremely early. I'm stumbling in that because there's something really important in there, which is when I'm working on any project or not, if I have an idea in the middle of the night, I get up and write it down because this is my job in the world, and I don't sleep through the muse entering the room. And often the muse comes in the middle of the night. So I stress that so many times in the book. I'm like, if something comes to you, get out of bed, like make yourself turn the light on, write it down, like get the whole thought. And that's part of my schedule, is allowing time and space for things like that. I to be very flexible and open. For me, I'm really privileged that I can do that. I don't have a family or anything like that, but I do think having a schedule while you're working on a project is completely different than having a creative schedule. I think a creative schedule can have a lot more flexibility, and it's really good to give yourself something not incredibly rigid while you're trying to just be creative.
Awesome. And your middle of the night thoughts are usually cohesive. You don't like look at them in the morning and go, why did I write down, squirrels?
No, sometimes I do that. Sometimes I can't even read what it is I wrote, but that's not the point.
Got it. All right. Gabriella says thank you and says, how do you let go of the fear of sharing your work and being vulnerable? Perhaps you didn't experience that because you knew you wanted to write for a larger audience, but do you have any advice for someone who is looking at that?
Yeah, I just say, no, of course. I think anyone has some sort of fear or doubt, no matter who they are. I don't care if you believe in yourself fully or not. There will be moments of total doubt that will come up, or fear around, especially we were talking before the call started about public speaking. And for me, that's something that I've been like that ever since I was a little kid. You could throw me on a stage in front of hundreds of strangers and I would have an act to do or something. I have that performative quality, but I also practice, and I'll read to my friends or I'll read to myself. I read all poems out loud. Like whenever I'm reading anything, I read it out loud. So I have a lot of practice in speaking vulnerable things that aren't even necessarily mine, which I think helps me do my own work.
Excellent. All right. Question and comment from Barbara, who says she's not sure how she found you or you found her, but she's glad to be here and to learn about this book. So not exactly a question, but I think something worth sharing in this difficult time. And Katrina says, thank you for the gift of the book, and your exercises will help her be more mindful. How do you see the connection between poetry and a mindfulness practice?
Well, the whole book is about that connection. So I'm like, the whole book is about me really understanding at some point that what I do with my mind is a gift that I could give to everyone else, because I just have this human brain that I practice this poetic mindfulness. And I just suddenly it clicked that I was like, oh, this is something I could break this down for everyone. And I think it would be really helpful because, as I said, no matter how hard it is to be alive, I'm still constantly in awe of every aspect of it. And I attribute that to my ability to carry a poetic mindset. So that once you read the whole book, then you'll know.
All right. And Linda wants to know a little bit about process in terms of choice of tools. You said that you have your notebooks, you do handwritten. Do you feel that that's a personal connection where you wouldn't write as readily on a keyboard, or do you think it's something you'd encourage other people to do?
I think writing by hand is important, but I just love the computer for editing so much. I wouldn't recommend editing anywhere else because the editing on the computer is just such a quick and interactive method. So I'll take a poem that's in kind of a rambly state from my journal and I'll put it into the computer, and then that's where I'll chop it up and make it into its next phase, which is more accessible for others. But I also use the typewriter still in a lot of moments, sometimes just for aesthetic quality, when I want to read something and experience it as done, but it's not done, just to let me know if I feel like it's done, or to just put it on my wall and look at it and think about it. I'll type it out on the typewriter because that act and just the way it looks is so helpful. So I have a lot of mediums, but with my hand, that's just, that's so direct. It feels the most direct.
More connectivity between your brain and the end result, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So one last question, another one from Cece, who says, I struggle with finding the quote unquote rhythm in poetry. Do you have a chapter that addresses that, or have any tips besides your recommendation of reading your work out loud?
Yeah, I really think listening to poets read their work out loud is so helpful for that, because it can be really confusing, especially if you're reading something that is maybe more esoteric, or that is like broken up in a way that's supposed to express something of a rhythm on the page, and it might be hard to figure out. If you listen to them read their work, then that's like a key into understanding maybe why they chose those line breaks, the pausing and the breath being held in between things, or even the space on the page can hold a lot of meaning for certain poets. So I just think once I would read one of my poems out loud to someone, they would understand it so much more. So it's kind of, you already knew that, I guess, but that's I really stick by that.
Thank you. All right. I think Terry is going to wrap us up. Thank you so much, Jacqueline.
Thank you. Thanks everyone so much for coming.
Jacqueline, thank you so much. I can't wait to get off this Zoom call and go find my purpose and write the workbook. You've totally inspired me. I just need to mention to everyone that we have copies of Every Day is a Poem with signed book plates from Jacqueline while supplies last. And of course, this book will make an amazing gift. So we want you to keep that in mind. So we encourage you to visit our website and get your copy, and support Jacqueline in creating conversations. And again, thank you everybody for coming. And Jacqueline, thank you for just a wonderful hour well spent.
Thank you. Have a good night.